She just made history for an entire nation, and 48 hours later, she was already talking about what comes next, and the way she talked about it is the reason the story is spreading faster than almost anything else in tennis right now. Eala's Wimbledon run ended on center court against Jasmine Paolini, and if you only look at the scoreline, you might think this is a story about a loss. It is not. What happened in the hours after that match, what she said, how she carried herself, and what it means for everything still ahead of her is exactly why I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Because there's a real question hanging over the rest of her season right now, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what it is. Before we go further, if you've been following this journey the way we have, from the first round wins nobody noticed the moment the entire tennis world suddenly did, then you already know what this channel stands for. We do not chase headlines. We actually sit with the story. So if that means something to you, subscribe right now, because this community is what keeps this kind of storytelling alive, and I promise you, the details coming up are worth sticking around for. Let's rewind to center court. Monday, July 6th, Eala, the 29 seed, 21 years old, walks out to face Jasmine Paolini, the 13 seed, a two-time Grand Slam finalist who reached the Wimbledon final herself back in 2024. This wasn't just any round of 16 match. This was Eala's first ever fourth-round appearance at a Grand Slam, and she was doing it just 2 days after the single biggest win of her career, a straight sets takedown of defending champion Iga Swiatek. Beating a defending Wimbledon champion is one thing. Backing it up 48 hours later against another proven Grand Slam finalist is an entirely different kind of pressure, and that tension is exactly what played out over 2 hours and 22 minutes on that court. The first set slipped away from her early. Paolini broke her serve in the fourth game, capitalizing on a vulnerable second serve, and built a commanding 4-1 lead. Eala clawed back to 4-2, even carved out a break point to threaten a real swing and momentum, but Paolini answered immediately, breaking straight back and eventually closing out the first set. Most players in that position start to fold. Eala didn't. She came out for the second set and flipped the entire tone of the match, breaking for an early lead, absorbing Paolini's counterpunch, and then producing one of the most talked-about moments of the entire tournament. Down low 40 on her own serve. Facing 3 break points that could have handed Paolini control of the match completely, Eala reeled off 5 straight points to erase all 3 and hold for a 5-3 lead. If you want to know what real composure under pressure actually looks like, that game is the answer. She closed out the second set in center court, packed with fans who had shown up specifically for her, erupted. But here's where the suspense really kicks in, because the third set is where the story could have gone either way. Through the first 7 games, neither player could find a single break point. It was locked tight, both players trading holds under an enormous amount of pressure. Then in the 8th game, Paolini finally cracked it open, earning the decisive break to move ahead 5-3, and she served out the match from there, winning 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. Eala's historic run was over, and I want you to sit with what that run actually was for a second, because this wasn't just a good tournament. This was the first time in the entire Open era that a Filipino player had reached the 4th round of a Grand Slam. The first time a Filipino player had ever won a main draw match at Wimbledon at all. She didn't just compete at the highest level of this sport. She rewrote what was considered possible for her country in tennis. And when she walked off that court having lost, something happened that tells you everything about why people are so drawn to this story. Center court gave her a standing ovation, not a polite golf clap. A full stadium on its feet for a player who had just lost a match. That almost never happens. And when it does, it usually means a crowd understood they had just watched something bigger than a result. So here's the part that should genuinely surprise you if you expected a heartbroken athlete. At the press conference afterward, Eala sat down in front of reporters and, instead of dwelling on the loss, she talked almost entirely about what she had learned. She described the match as a lesson in what she called the small margins that separate the top players in this sport, and when asked directly what positives she could take from the entire tournament, she pointed first to how she had handled pressure throughout the week, saying she felt she had stayed cool when she needed to and controlled her emotions even as the stakes kept climbing. She was honest about the parts that didn't go her way too, admitting her serve simply wasn't at the level of an earlier in the tournament, but she framed it the way a veteran would, not a 21-year-old still finding her footing, saying that everyone has days where they don't play their best tennis, and that it's simply part of the job. Even Paolini, the player who had just ended her run, had nothing but respect for what she'd faced. In her own press conference, Paolini admitted that this match was a very different test than the one Eala had given her earlier in the year in Dubai, where Paolini had actually lost to her in straight sets. This time, Paolini said she came in with better energy and stayed present in every single point because she knew exactly how dangerous Eala was playing. That's not something a two-time Grand Slam finalist says about just anyone. And here's where the numbers make this story even bigger. That third round win over Iga Swiatek wasn't just a great result. It became one of the most watched moments of the entire tournament. The highlights from that match pulled in over 1.2 million views on Wimbledon's own YouTube channel, making it the most watched clip of the whole championships. And her post-match press conference after that win drew close to 580,000 views on its own. For comparison, even Serena Williams' much-hyped comeback match highlights that same tournament sat under 550,000. Alex Eala wasn't just winning matches. She was pulling in audiences that usually only follow the very biggest names in the sport. Zoom out even further and look at her season as a whole, because this Wimbledon run did not come out of nowhere. Across an 11-match stretch against players ranked in the world's top 10, Eala has gone 7 wins and 4 losses, a run that includes victories over some of the most recognizable names on the entire WTA Tour. This is a pattern that should make every player left on the calendar nervous. She isn't just occasionally beating elite players. She is doing it consistently enough that it's becoming her identity on tour. So what does all of this actually mean going forward? After this run, Eala sits at a new career high in the live world rankings, 28th, and there is real, credible discussion in the tennis world about her pushing into the top 20 in the very near future. That is not hype from social media. That is where the ranking math genuinely points if she keeps performing anywhere near this level. And that is exactly why the next few tournaments on her calendar matter so much. Because the tennis world has already seen her beat a defending Wimbledon champion and push a Grand Slam finalist to the absolute limit in the same week. The question nobody can answer yet is whether she can carry that same level onto hard courts through the rest of the summer, all the way to the U.S. Open. Here's the detail I wanted to hold on to until the very end of this video, because it's the one that actually decides how this entire story is remembered. Eala herself said the difference in that final set came down to very fine details, 1 or 2 points, and how a player manages themselves in exactly those moments. That is the entire story where her career sits right now. She has already proven she can beat the very best players in the world. What's still being written is whether she can consistently win those 1 or 2 points when a Grand Slam quarterfinal, or eventually a title, is sitting on the other side of them. That gap, the one between reaching the biggest stages and actually closing matches out on them, is now the single most important question in Philippine tennis. And every tournament between now and the U.S. Open is going to give us another piece of the answer. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Alex Eala closes that gap before the U.S. Open, or does she need another full season to get there? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story means anything to you the way it means something to us, subscribe and stay in this circle, because we are going to be tracking every single step of what comes next before anyone else does.